We take on the darkness, stare down deceit. Murder in the headlines, justice in the beat. From cold case whispers to killers in disguise, we rip off the mask, expose all the lies. Facts like bullets we load and deliver. Truth cuts deep like a blade in a river. Corruption shakes when the mic goes live. We dig where others won't survive. James rolling through the smoke. Truth hits hard, no time for a joke. Deceit, murder, we name every name. No restraint, no shame, just flame. Locked on the case, we investigate.
This is 12 Gauge Investigative. Let's jump in.
Ever need 12 Gauge Investigate. We make them bleed. No games, no censors, just truth. Justice is loud, and we're the sound. This is 12 Gauge Investigative.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. My morning is going well so far. Thank you for asking. I hope yours is as well. You know, every morning is a great morning whenever you hear the bird chirping, the sun is out. You know, every morning is a great morning. And also, whenever your favorite team, the Texas Longhorns women's softball team, won the national championship, first one ever in the SEC, and they've been there 8 times prior trying to win that. So the fact that they won that is pretty awesome, I believe. So kind of makes your morning go a little better. So I was watching this individual named Tony Brueski, and if you've never been to his channel is called Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. If you could put that link in the chat, Walt, that'd be awesome. And make sure that you go over there and give him some likes and give him some subscriptions. I'm about to play his video on 8 clues that suggest Kohberger wanted to be caught. I mean, this is strictly his opinion. So I thought it'd be interesting to listen to it, and I will comment on it, and we'll go from there. If you've never been to this channel, it's a pretty good channel. It's not bad at all. So let's go ahead and begin with Mr. Brueski and see what he has to say about Mr. Kohberger. Here we go.
How do we begin to separate possible mental health conditions from dangerous criminal intent in a case like this?
Yeah, autism, if that's what they're going to go for with that, which it certainly sounds like that's going to be raised as an issue, has absolutely nothing to do with criminal behavior. There are millions and millions of people in the US and in every other country of the world that carry a diagnosis at this point of autistic spectrum disorder. That does not mean that they have dangerous fantasies. It does not mean they plot violence, and in no way does it mean that they don't have a moral compass or a conscience.
Oh, damn. Right off the bat, she says that there's millions and millions of people that have been diagnosed with autism that don't present those type of traits or even thoughts to become a killer. So right off the bat, I mean, this person is knocking it out of the park.
So that is certainly not something that should factor into whether or not a person is guilty or innocent of something like this, because it simply doesn't result in that kind of behavior.
I want to talk about some of the behavior that occurred after the fact, after the crime was committed. And I think there's some nuggets here that are before that also kind of tie in when we try to examine the mind of Kohberger. Way back, right after the crimes were committed, before they had Kohberger in custody, before we knew the name Brian Kohberger, there was Papa Rogers. Remember Papa Rogers online, the guy that would comment on the case on various.
Okay. Regarding Papa Roger, I can't really, excuse me, I can't really speak on that a lot because honestly, I don't know whether that individual was Brian or whether it wasn't. I've seen a lot of podcasts that try to incorporate that, but none of it really has led to a fluid outcome where a definitive connection between Brian and Papa Roger exists. I know that there's been people that have tried to make that correlation, but in reality, I've never seen anything that's led to a definitive outcome of whether Mr. Koberger was Papa Roger or not. So we'll continue on.
Facebook groups and such that seem to have inside knowledge, knew about the knife sheath, knew about other elements that were not public knowledge as of that point. The profile picture looked a lot like Brian Koberger if you're to do like an artistic rendition of him. And then when he was arrested, those messages stopped. It was interesting. It seemed like someone was taunting, and maybe it was him. We don't.
So as far as the inside looking, I would believe more that aspect that could have been Brian than the Papa Roger. I don't know why the Papa Roger really doesn't really incorporate in my mind to think that would have been Brian Koberger. The inside looking, now that would have made a lot more sense to me than the other. I mean, I understand about the icon and the whole facing sideways view and everything, how people have stated that it could have been Papa Roger, Brian Koberger mocking the police or anything like that. The Soviet stuff that happened in Stickergate and all that crap. But I really don't believe that he had any ties to that whatsoever. I could be wrong, and that could come out later on, and we can go and investigate that further if that does come out later on.
Know the full answer to that question yet.
Hello.
And then also immediately after the crime, we have learned that he took that picture in the shower of him standing there, that selfie, wearing that tight buttoned up white shirt. And it's just a bizarre picture. You look at it and go, why? Is this a taunt? And is that all it is? I want to get your insights on this, considering the Papa Rogers part that existed that we are aware of and the correlations with the picture, because I found a few when I was on vacation the other week. I really wasn't that much on vacation.
No, I was talking about the Papa Roger picture. I was talking about the Papa Roger picture with the side view. I don't believe that was, I mean, it did kind of resemble Brian from an older version or something, but as far as the shower picture, he's discussed this on his channel before, so I'm kind of intuitive to see what he has to say. Welcome this morning.
Because I was sitting there on my phone all day working on stuff. This is the shower picture. He's sitting there with a thumbs up. You can't see it because it's cropped. And next to it is images from the movie American Psycho.
Wow.
And same button up. That's more of a like a smock or something, but very similar look, all cleaned up. And obviously he's holding an axe. It was a knife that was used, but very similar type looks. So that's the movie American Psycho. You also have, of course, the movie Psycho, and we all know the main scene in that is a shower. Mm-hmm. And Norman Bates wasn't a character that was necessarily understood, and people were always thinking him as a bit awkward.
And we have talked about the shower picture in here. We've talked about a lot of definitive things that are up to date as far as the Koberger case. We have our own theories over here. We have, as far as the shower picture, I discussed it last night because I was reading the book while Idaho slept. And they were in the book, it was going through the diagrams of the timeline. Well, as far as the part that I had no clue about, and if it is correct, he stopped at the Cage Cup of Joe and just idled in a drive-thru, never ordered any coffee. He stopped along the road for 4 minutes and just, and I was wondering, and I even said this to my chat last night, what could he have been doing during those stops? What could he have been really having going on during those stops? Was he looking up information, whether the house has already been, police had already arrived? Was he trying to find out information online? Was he texting somebody? Was he looking at a grocery list? What was he doing? I mean, it really doesn't pertain to the murders, but it's still a little bit inquisitive of behavior. You know what I mean? Like, what was the individual doing at that point? So, and then obviously he went home. He made it home at 5:38. Stayed home for a little while, obviously, as the timeline depicts. And then he went back out from 9:12 to 9:21 around the King Road residence. He was spotted, his phone ping was around the residence. He stayed around there for a while, and then he went home, and not long after, this selfie was taken as the police took this from his phone. So I was wondering, what was he doing? Was he looking for something? Was he, especially when he went back? When he went back from 9:12 to 9:21, that always seemed to stick out. There's parts of this case that stick out in my head that are more prevalent than others. I mean, all the little stuff, all the little, well, this happened, that happened, this person, that person, he was weird, he was this, he was that. All that, it just, fillers. I'm talking about these moments whenever he actually has stops in the timeline, when he has gaps where he's turning off that phone. And I read last night there was a total of 7 hours of unaccounted phone time. So, as I was saying last night, if you watch a pattern of phone use and you're looking at the pattern, and then all of a sudden it's consistent, because this individual seemed to be very consistent with his stuff, and then all of a sudden they start to have little glitches in that pattern. That is very definitive of suspicious activity. Even if it's not tying him to the murders, it is still suspicious activity to be looked at by law enforcement. You know what I mean? So that just for, food for thought. So once he made it back home at 10:30 and did this shower curtain or shower selfie, to me, I don't know what to think of it. I've looked at the knuckles; they looked a little bruised. The hand looks a little bruised, but that's my opinion. He seemed to be smiling. I mean, other than that, I mean, I don't know what to think about it. I really don't.
Awkward. We have Koberger, who also felt very similar ways from his own writings. Mm-hmm. Two movies that seem to have a lot of correlation to that shower picture and also use the word psycho in their titles. Mm-hmm. And my conjecture on it would be, he feels that everyone thinks he's a psycho. He's probably been called that because of his weird ways of living, or just the effects of having autism, and you just operate differently. But then outside the neurotypical, you may not understand it, and you get made fun of or picked on or what have you. He clearly did have a history of that happening as well. Mm-hmm. Is that shower picture a big F you to everybody going, you all think I'm psycho? I'm going to put this out there right in front of you with a big thumbs up after I murder people, referencing these damn movies that no one's ever going to think that no one's going to catch this.
But also you have to ask yourself, if they did find this in the phone, okay, let's say that we've been told that this selfie was in his phone. Was it sent to anybody, or was it just a selfie that he took to collaborate some kind of alibi, some kind of, well, this is where I was at this time? Because there's going to be a timestamp on that selfie. What's more interesting is if he sent it to somebody, then you can say, well, he was taking the selfie to send to these people. But if it was never sent, you have to ask yourself, okay, was this, I take selfies all the time myself, amongst other people, but you have to ask yourself, do you ever send those or do you just take them for yourself? You know, it's kind of odd for a man to be taking a selfie and not sending it to a girlfriend, parents, somebody as a prank, whatever, you know, Photoshop it with some silliness or whatever. We don't know what the purpose was of this selfie, but that's the question that I have as well. Did he send it to somebody or did he not? If he didn't send it, you have to ask yourself, okay, what was his thought pattern regarding this selfie? Y'all have any thoughts in the chat? Let me know if you do. Everything is, like I said, everything is okay to type in the chat. We don't have to type rugs or all those other silly words. You can type drugs, rape, murder, kill, blood, all that stuff. So if you have any thoughts on it, just please let me know.
And I got away with it. I'm really wondering because again, he's innocent until proven guilty. But how does this strike you?
It's absolutely fascinating. And, I had stayed from the movie American Psycho back when it came out. I was younger and I just thought it would freak me out. I didn't watch it. You've got me curious now.
I haven't watched it in years. I didn't remember most of it. I'm going to watch it now.
I'm going to rewatch, just because that is really eerie. And looking at those images that you've got there, it's pretty spine chilling. So the picture of him with the thumbs up, I found incredibly creepy. Because it definitely looks like he's proud of himself. He's accomplished something. And what an odd thing to take in the shower. It looks like his hair's still wet. And there's definitely meaning there. And, considering what we know about this whole situation now, it's a pretty dark meaning.
Yeah.
So if there is a significance to this selfie, we're talking about the mens rea, which is the guilty mind, and the negligence part. The guilty mind determines the pattern of mindset of a potential suspect whenever a crime is committed. When they're doing the profiling, this mens rea plays a huge part as not only to be finding the potential perpetrator, but also to be this not discrediting, but to eliminate other people that could have been close to the scene of the crime. So kind of like whenever they're looking for a perpetrator or a suspect, most of the time they're looking to eliminate these people rather than place them as a suspect. Most of the time, that's how it happens. So they're not always looking for a person right off the bat. And like I've said, they didn't even have Mr. Koberger on the radar until December 21st. So all that stuff leading up to December 21st, they were putting the pieces together. Excuse me. As they were getting them. Let me see what Walt had to say right here. I wanted to commemorate the fact that he completed the mission and wanted the photo to be used for future intimidation. That's a good thought. That's a very good thought. So let's continue on. This is basically just talking about 6 ways that they felt these individuals feel that he wanted to get caught. And if that's true, if we later find that out, then he did make some mistakes, as we know he did if he is indeed found guilty by the jury.
My reaction is I made this. It's like, oh my God, Koberger's shower picture is a taunting reference to American Psycho. And then I was like, oh, Psycho too? Same, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big screw you. How often do we see, and you've written a great book on this, and the minds of what's the full title? I know.
Minds of Mass Killers: Understanding and Interrupting the Pathway to Violence.
Yes, you'll forgive me if I don't remember it all.
That's okay. It's a long one.
But yes, when we're talking about that, how often do we see mass killers basically emulate something because they don't feel, because they're missing that empathy, so they have to mimic something else or someone else? Sometimes it's a real killer. Sometimes, like, references with him have been to BTK. He studied under Catherine Ramsland, who wrote the book on BTK. How often do they find character?
A mass killer is the label or moniker that he would fit under, as Dr. Bricado has written in his book, The New Evil. You know, mass killer is an individual, kind of like what Tony just said. It's very organized, and he has the ability to go in and take out multiple people, which, in my opinion, I believe that he was just going after Madison. But there's a lot of things that went wrong and ended up 4 people being killed. There's always been speculation and question about how come the other 2 weren't murdered. So if he would have went in and murdered all 6 people, would that mattered any different on the way people view him? The fact that 2 people were left alive, does that make it any less of a crime scene? I mean, does it make it any less of a viciousness of young people dying? No, it does not. But the mass killer moniker, it entails that the individual was very methodical. Tony brought up his mindset. Also talked about that in my video last night and the night before, where they were talking about his capability of being very, very one-dimensional towards a specific genre, how he had his wordings towards other people. He would like say old school stuff, like as somebody said in the chat, an old school saying is birthing hips. And then he was talking about, after the murders to his neighbor, he was very excited and he was very motivated to talk about this murder, when yet there wasn't a lot of things out there about it. So the neighbor's name was Christian Martinez, and Christian's wife didn't really like Mr. Koberger. She thought that there was something off about him, which, that's been said about him multiple times. That definitely does not make him a killer. But, having something off about you, this totally, it just, another red flag, so to speak. So are they going to look at somebody who is functionable, approachable, all this, or are they going to look at somebody that has these monikers on them? He's odd. He's, standoffish. He's not approachable. He's not really, he has temper issues. And also, there's been other things said about him, such as he was friendly. He was kind. He didn't respect boundaries, though. So there was 2 sides. Was he really capable of feeling that kindness, that playful interaction with people, or was he acting out a role? Was that real? Was that genuine? Or was he just doing what he thought he should have been doing? And I'm referencing that to the situation with the female that he met on Tinder, when she said that he was tickling her, he was touching her, and then when she asked him to stop, he abruptly said, "I'm not touching you." So if that did go down like that, does that not seem a little odd to you? Let me know what you think in the chat. I'm going to continue on with this video.
Or characters that they think they can relate to, and almost idolize to an extent where then they're going to go out and give nods like this to them.
Yeah, my sense is that it's nearly always these guys, they're from early in life, they have been thinking about murder, they've been thinking about ways to kill people, ways to torture people. And usually this is reflected in their choice of entertainment, in the movies that they watch. Often they watch certain kinds of horror films over and over and over again. They begin to identify with the perpetrators, the killers. Most of us, when we watch scary movies, we identify with the victims, right?
Sure.
We're scared. We want the bad guy to get caught. They identify with the perpetrators. And whether it's the mass shooters who study each other online and try to out-top each other's kill scores, guys that become serial killers often become fascinated with other serial killers.
That's what makes me wonder about.
Let me ask you a question, chat. I know that you are kind of probably drinking your coffee and getting woken up. I get it. It's fairly early for some of you. Let me ask you a question. The point that was made about him following Bundy and how he supposedly watched Bundy videos and how he watched Son of Sam videos and how he was intricated with these people. I understand him studying criminology and criminal justice, but that didn't happen until until his master's degree, which we found out by reading that book. I always thought he was studying criminal justice and criminology all the way through, but that's not true. It was psychology until he got until he was going for his master's, and at that point, he started with the criminal justice criminology. So, do you believe that Brian was enamored by the thought process of serial killers, by Bundy, by Son of Sam, by BTK if he was studying him at all? Tell me what you think about that. Do you think that Brian was potentially fascinated by the thoughts of a serial killer? Because that's been brought up more than once. It's been brought up time and time again. What do y'all think about that, chat? Do you think that he was fascinated by that? Do you think that he was able to be in that moment where he would be thinking, well, I wonder how he was feeling when this crime happened, when he did this, when he did that? Because as we know, when they write books on serial killers, they get very graphic. They get very step by step, play by play. So tell me what y'all think. Is there anybody in the chat, or is everybody watching? Because the chat's not moving like it normally does, and that's interesting to me. There's not a lot of people in here either, like there usually is. I mean, there's a lot of people that usually hop in. I know it's the weekend, but y'all didn't block everybody, did y'all? Hope not.
About these images. Oh, by the way, also knives too. I think axe actually in An American Psycho, but the knives in the movie Psycho wasn't a gun or anything used there. It's so bizarre, but it kind of makes sense at the same time that would be what could be going on here. Knowing this, they're just seeing this right now. What else would you be looking for if you were to be going through Kohberger's stuff to go, is there anything else here that can kind of tie him to this that maybe we didn't look at yet because maybe we didn't realize there was this nod to this type of a character? What other things should be examined?
Well, the big tell would be where he went on the internet. And I don't know what information they were able to glean about that, but that was the first thing that popped into my head when he was arrested was where does this guy hang out online? Because that's incredibly relevant. What kind of porn is he into? What kind of women is he into?
And that's a great statement right there. You know, when you watch these professionals and they do speak like they do, I mean, she's obviously dealt with, a lot of situations where she can opine on these things. What would cause law enforcement not to look into search history, porn history? I mean, any history that a man would be searching for and trying to make connections into, okay, does this fit with any of the victims that we have at this point? We have two blondes and a brunette. We have a male. Did any of the situation reflect art? Did the art was art being brought into real life by anything that the individual was potentially watching, studying, reading, all trying to find evidence and clues as to what direction to go towards to try to find the perpetrator. Because once again, they didn't have their eyes on Brian until December 21st. So that's quite a while regarding looking for a perpetrator. We were also being told that, this crime could potentially turn cold because there wasn't a lot of stuff being brought out early on. There really wasn't. There wasn't a lot of press conferences. There wasn't a lot of things going on. So there was a lot of investigation behind the scenes. So you can imagine that they're looking at digital history once they started to get more information about this person. Once they found out the license or the driver's license and the phone number, you start to accumulate, okay, well, we're going to run pings on this phone number. Let's wait for the AT&T data to come back. Let's see what it shows. And then once you start mounting all that evidence up, then you're really starting to formulate a plan of action in order to look for certain individuals, at the same time focusing on this individual who is obviously a forerunner now based on all the other tips that you've been given, all the information that's coming in. You're still investigating those, but this one's just connecting left and right. So it's not tunnel vision. It's merely police work. And I'd like to present that to people as an understanding that, you know, it is it is just something that goes along with trying to find out who the suspect or the perpetrator is in any kind of case.
Interested in watching or looking at. I think all of that would have a lot of importance in a case like this.
I would now, seeing that, I'd be wondering about like Netflix history or
Yes.
any streaming platform history.
Yes.
What is he watching? What is he watching on a
Yes.
regular basis? Do people like this, let's say that I'm right and that there is some sort of connection here with this. Do people like this like obsessively rewatch these sort of things
Yes.
over and over typically? Or it's not just I watched it once and I idolize this guy. It's more of a, I'm wondering if like things like this feed people like that because they don't have much feeling and then they get something out of the movie from the bad guy perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very much. They will have their favorite films, watch them over and over and over and over. And even with just an interesting one that we wouldn't have expected, about the film Bowling for Columbine, which was an anti-gun movie put out by Michael Moore. And a lot of kids that subsequently went on to become mass killers had been fascinated with that film as youngsters and grew up, and it was one of their favorite films, and they watched it over and over and over again.
I mean, that makes sense as well, to think about what they're talking about. You have to listen to what they're saying. I know a lot of people don't like to listen to these individuals because they say that they're biased or they're one-dimensional. I understand that. But they're also giving you a breakdown of how certain things are applicable whenever evidence and everything else is being looked into. So if there's a pattern, an obsessive type pattern of looking at certain websites over and over and over, and as we know or we assume, Mr. Koberger had a very pattern ritualistic type demeanor about him. The cleaning, the neatly dressed. He was always neatly dressed. He was never disheveled. You never saw pictures of his hair all over the place. He was it appeared to be very put together. So if you're looking for a pattern, if you're looking for any kind of obsessiveness on any kind of websites, any kind of search history. Look at the Amazon stuff that we've been told about. You think that he only searched a K-bar knife one time? I'll search history for knives or any kind of assault type stuff was found in that search history. I just ordered from Amazon just now before this stream. And if somebody were to pull up my history, they'd see water, they'd see energy drink, they'd see vitamins, they'd see stuff for streaming, they would see all kinds of stuff like that. So if you were going to put together based on what my orders were, you would say, well, this guy likes to drink a lot of water, obviously. He orders it every 2 weeks. He drinks those little Celsius drinks, so obviously he has issues with up and going in the morning or whenever throughout the day. So he has streaming equipment that he's bought, microphones, lights, all kinds of stuff. So obviously he's into this type of stuff. So it's kind of pretty normal. But if you look into other search histories, and I'm not talking just about Brian, I'm talking about a lot of different type of individuals who are potentially out there right now as we're speaking to be potential mass killers or even serial killers. They're on this internet searching nonstop. You think that they only search for victims a couple of hours? No, it is almost an obsessive, compulsive situation where they don't sleep, they don't eat very much. It's almost like an addictive pattern. It's like you're getting the pleasure in the limbic system from it. So therefore, you're on a rush to try to get as much visual stimuli because just like with your cell phone, you ever notice that whenever something is going on, let's say you go into a restaurant, you go into a doctor's office or whatever, and you're having to wait, the first thing you do is you pick up your cell phone, you scroll. That's turning on that cell phone automatically releases dopamines in your brain, and it automatically gives you a sense of, okay, now I'm going to be looking at stuff. So this boredom that while I'm sitting here does not take me over. So I'm feeding my endorphin, dopamine, serotonin. I'm feeding all this stuff while I'm sitting there. So think about the pornography that they're talking about that Mr. Koberger supposedly was viewing. If there's a pattern in his search history, or there's some kind of obsessive linking to certain porn that he was watching, or was he reading certain types of things that would have been conducive of educating yourself to commit a crime under the cover of I'm a criminology major, I'm a criminal justice major? It's easy to say, well, I could have been researching for this. Okay, but this is not research. This is the actual planning. There's a difference between research and planning. And how was the planning conducive to anything you were studying? You get what I'm saying? So it's not always, you know, well, he was a criminal justice major, he was into criminology. That's why he was looking at this. That's why he was doing that. Well, granted, that could have happened, but it's the specific areas of his viewing that would have been conducive to anybody looking to commit a crime. What was he researching? What was he looking at? You know, another thing really quick before I continue on is people have asked whether Brian could have been the one that was calling those not or calling in those noise complaints. I don't know enough of when Brian actually got there to that area to really speculate or even talk on that. But if he was there early on enough, do you think he could have called those noise complaints in? Or has there actually been documentation of who actually did that? The chat, can you do that? Can you answer that question for me if you know the answer? Or if you watch this on replay and you know that answer, go ahead and type it in the comment section. Here we go.
even though most of us would watch it and say, well, that was really an anti-violence movie.
Yeah.
But they liked the scenes of the killers in the movie and became fascinated with that and therefore watched it repeatedly.
Why? I mean, what is that makes a mind watch scenes like that and then sympathize or empathize or get joy from the I mean, is it like porn to them? Like, I guess or seeing a member of the sex you're attracted to, you know, in some sort of way. Is it that sort of a stimulation that they get out of it? Is it a sexual stimulation, or is it something else that's just like that's strong but there?
I think you nailed it. It's that sense of arousal, and whether or not it's actually sexual to them, I can't say. It may be in some cases, but it certainly is exciting and it makes them feel good. And that's that component of psychopathy that most of us, fortunately, do not have that. So we will watch horrible things in the media and have this revulsion or this sense of, oh, that's terrible, or that's so sad, something negative. But people that are psychopathic will watch it and go, isn't this cool? Isn't this exciting? So a very different response.
The fact
she is making some great points. I mean, she really is. Think about, you know, like what she was just saying. You see something awful happen. Most people are going to be like, "Oh my God, that's terrible." Let's take the example of the individual, Travis Decker, that killed his 3 little girls. Many people hear this and they're like, "Oh my God, that is terrible to think about. That is terrible to visualize. That is terrible to think that a person would be able to kill 3 little children." While on the other hand, if there's an individual that has no empathy, no ability to attach himself or his feelings to something like that, would be like, "Oh my God, that is cool." And that is one of the reasons why hurting animals, killing animals at a young age, wetting the bed, all these other stuff, arson, all these behaviors are conducive to the direction that a person is going to be going in life, especially harming animals. The ability to harm an animal, something that is lesser than you and cannot defend themselves, and you are a young child and you're able to kill an animal just to kill it, just to see what's going on. And you continue going with that train of thought, and your mental process gets more and more and more distorted. By the time you reach middle adolescence, you're already potentially able to commit your first crime. And many people, as we've looked at these serial killers, they were committing crimes at a very early age.
I mean, obviously, so many things are very digital now. So that's why I said, look at the history of what he's watching.
Yeah.
But what about physical objects? I would wonder with something like this, if this is something you are that passionate about, people will still collect physical things for things they're really into. So I'm wondering, was there a copy of American Psycho or Psycho in his house? Was there the book American Psycho in his house? Was there anything relating to these characters in his possession? Obviously, they've rated it. I'm really wondering what they went through. Would you be surprised if they found something with it? And what sort of things do people like that collect? I know there's trophies that people get or that they have after their killings. I'm wondering if that picture itself is the trophy. It is with a nod to everything that inspired. But what would you be looking for in like physical objects or things like that around his house, as far as markings or anything like that? What have you seen?
I would be looking for any other types of weaponry. A lot of times people will have photographs or save articles or stories about different kinds of knives or guns or different kinds of weapons. Even historical books about different kinds of war crimes or criminals or Nazis or, strange things that would just be out of place in most of our bookshelves or our homes.
Let's move away from the picture for a moment, but let's talk about some of the things that he was doing with his studies. Obviously, we've seen some of the questions that he had for the DeSales research that he was doing, very specific questions about emotions, very specific about how did you feel when you committed the crime. What was weird to me about it was the question seemed over the top, as if he were asking them as someone who committed murder, not necessarily someone who was like shoplifting or something of that nature. I don't have the list in front of me right now, but they were very much along those lines. But if you're studying criminology, it could make sense that you're going to be researching all that.
But at that point, Tony, I keep wanting to call him Teddy Brueski after the linebacker from the Patriots. So, Tony Brueski. So, at that point, he wasn't studying criminology. He was studying psychology. So I want people to really understand that. When he was at DeSales, it was psychology. When he was at Northampton Community College, it was psychology. He did not start studying criminology and criminal justice until he went to his master's program. So the questionnaire could have been that summer. But I believe that those questions that were being asked were more about the psychological effect of what a criminal-minded person would be experiencing while either preparing for a crime or going through the crime. And that's why that questionnaire was so specific. It broke down a lot of those questions, and that's why if you're looking at the mens rea, does this signify guilty mind or negligence? One or the other, So if you're looking at that, you have to understand, okay, did this meet a criteria, once again, to put this little puzzle piece into Brian's column or not? So many people are stuck on the car, um, they're stuck on a lot of things. Linda Lane, they're stuck on the Banfield, they're stuck on the fire hydrant, they're stuck on all these things that have nothing to do with the house. So if you're looking at the mental aspect of this crime, if you're really investigating it, to investigate this crime, you're going to try to find the evidence that matches the mens rea, which is the guilt of somebody committing this crime. So many times I hear that people say, well, they're trying to make a guilty man. They're trying to frame somebody. They're trying to do this. They're trying to do that, which is not true. Anybody who meet this guilty and negligent aspect of the initial investigation could have been thought of as a suspect. You ask, why wasn't Dylan? Why wasn't Bethany? Because they were interviewed and they were let go. Hunter, interviewed, let go. Emily, interviewed, let go. I'm sure they had their fingerprint taken. I'm sure they had their DNA taken. I'm sure they had all this stuff taken that eventually would later exonerate them. Or had any of their DNA been under the fingernails or anything like that of the deceased, then they probably would have been looked at a little further. But since that didn't happen, you have to understand that, that's why they were let go. That's why they were not active suspects in the crime.
In the context of who we think he might be or is alleged to be, it makes more sense. And there's also now the essay that was out there. We've seen some excerpts from it, basically an essay on how to process a stabbing crime scene. Is it just part of the studies, or do folks like this really go to this level of obsession and researching what they want to do, especially if it's their first time doing it?
Yeah, that's the thing that's so interesting in hindsight, is looking back at his academic life and being able to speculate about how much of this was really meeting his fantasy needs at the time, and how much he was actually studying how to be a better criminal and get away with these things. Really feeling, as it looked like in that photograph, that he was quite proud of himself when he thought he.
And once again, I'm going to reference The New Evil by Dr. Bricado. And I know a lot of you have different thoughts on Dr. Bricado, but I respect the man and I respect his thoughts and his writings. He's very thorough, and he's very, you know, I was going to say methodical, but you know, he's very inclined to give his theories, and they're easy to understand because they go step by step. So if you are looking at the mass killing, there is a definitive pattern of this individual who committed this crime, because I'm going to leave it up to the jury at this point. I believe he's guilty, but the jury's going to have to be the final say. You know what I mean? I believe it, but I'm not on the jury. The jury's going to be the final say, whether he's guilty, whether he's innocent, all that mess. And thank God I'm not on the jury. Um, you know, the pattern of preparing for a crime, as we've looked at other serial killers, look at Bundy, look at John Wayne Gacy, look at Dahmer, look at Ramirez, look at um, Roland. They all had this plan that they would carry out. Look at the Gilgo Beach killer. They all had a presentation, a double life, so to speak. Behind the scenes, they were this person. While they were committing their crimes, they were this person. If you look at their lives interchangeably, they had the same type of approach. They were very, very disciplined in these certain areas. So if you're looking at the mens rea of these crimes, you look at that discipline as well as another aspect of who could have committed the crime and how did they get from point A to point Z.
He had gotten away with it.
Yeah, very much so. Some are looking at it as a smoking gun. I don't know if it is or not. A jury will ultimately decide that. But we have the knife sheath, the knife, the sharpener, all bought by him on Amazon, at least the same model. But it was done about 6 months before the murders actually took place. There's also the ski mask that one of the witnesses, the surviving roommates, says that they saw him in with the bushy eyebrows. Shows he bought one of those too. Happens to look like the same one she described as seeing way back. The fact that they were purchased so far in advance, we're talking like 6 months to a year on some of these things. What does that say about this? I guess sometimes when you think of a case or stories like this, they buy those things right before. At least we think they buy them right before. Is that incorrect? Do people start really planning this out and getting their supplies that far out?
It's certainly likely that he would have bought it quite a bit before he was actually ready to use it, assuming that he was planning, plotting, rehearsing. And it's a scary thought, but what just occurred to me as you mentioned that is we don't know how many times he was driving around with these things in his car, perhaps looking at other people in other places, and he just never got the exact right opportunity.
Would that mean that this was somewhat random?
I mean, to be fair, the balaclava could have been bought as a preventative, moving out, probably heard about how cold the climate is. But the fact that it was one of those masks that was seen in the crime, and if he had one of those in his possession, it's not about, once again, it's not about solving, convicting, and sentencing this man as you're investigating. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. You're just investigating. You're not having your emotional attachment to it. Many people believe that emotionally, these police officers, these investigators were emotionally attached. We got to get this guy. We got to get a guy. So let's make these shoes fit. And it's really not that way at all. If you look at investigative techniques, you walk into a home. The obvious, the body's on the floor. There's blood around it. But there's a light turned over. There's blood smudge on the couch that's not so easily seen. Those are the pieces of evidence that are most important because you already see the body, how it's laid, you know, the measurements, all that stuff. That's easy stuff. What these individuals investigating this crime and other crimes that they do are looking for these unseen little bits of evidence. That's why the knife sheath, the DNA under the knife sheath button, was so important. And that's why it seems to be holding so much weight. Because how would that have gotten there other than the person who bought the K bar online, because you have the digital history, because you have the digital searches, you have it being bought, you have how it was bought, you have where it was sent to, you have who got the knife. If there's any pictures of him holding that knife, that K bar, we don't know. We don't know if there's any pictures of him taking selfies with the K bar. Why wouldn't we know that? Because we're going to want to show that in the trial in front of the jury to show that this individual could have committed this crime, because not only did he have this type of knife, he also showed he had this knife in a photo. You get what I'm saying? And once again, and I can't reiterate this enough, I'm not trying to make this man a killer. I'm not. I'm not trying to say guilty or innocent. I believe he's guilty. But as far as my channel's concerned, I am trying to show different aspects on how this individual and other future crimes, how they tie things together, not based on emotional attachment, not based on tunnel vision, not based on any of that stuff, but based on the investigative tactics that they learn while they're studying to be what they ultimately become. Mr. Koberger made some mistakes, I'm sure, that seasoned officers and seasoned investigators picked up right off the bat, because he was not that far into it. He had only done his master's, so that's probably a year and a half of learning. And these investigators have 10, 15, 20, 30 years experience. They're going to be able to pick up mistakes quicker than just the average person.
Random, and he was just gonna run into any house that had people in just to kill, or do you think we're going to find a lot more premeditation? Because we do have more data now that shows just how often he was circling that house, and
Yeah.
it's a lot, even that night, and we're finding more camera information out too of where he was seen, and or the vehicle, at least what appears to be the vehicle that was seen. So are you saying that there's someone like this would likely have the tools with them when they're stalking, even if they're not going to go commit the crime at that moment? Part of having like the getup is an important part to them?
Certainly could be. And, when his defense liked to make the point that he just was this harmless guy who liked to go out at night and drive around. Well, that sounds like stalking behavior to me. It's what a predator does. They go out. A lot of them are voyeuristic, so they're watching, they're looking for windows they can peep in. They're looking for women they can see out, maybe walking home from a bar, and follow them home. And they do look for just the right opportunity, but they may pick a certain person and then watch them over the course of time before they actually, plot the attack. But could he have been doing that for months? Yeah, I don't think I would be trying to make the case, well, he's just such a nice guy out driving around at night all the time.
Well, and the looking at the stars went up in flames when they realized,
Right.
oh, it was extremely foggy that night. Like,
Yeah.
And also, I've come to understand more knowledge in that book that I'm reading. And once again, I'm taking it with a grain of salt. I'm not taking it as definitive evidence from a book, but it's interesting that some of the stuff that this book talks about was way out there even before any of these documents came out. And I'm kind of curious that if in the trial we see any of this stuff come to fruition. So think about him driving around, okay? He had his phone off. He's driving around in the wee hours of the morning. But once the sun comes up, think of all the cameras that would have caught this man coming back to the location. 9:12 to 9:21. It's daylight. Did he have his phone was obviously on. It was pink. So they have him around the King Road house. So if he came back the direct route that he always took, because think about the patterns, the obsessiveness. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to go this way. There's some cameras along that route that captured not only while it was dark, but now it's daytime. You don't think these cameras would have caught the same image during the day, but with a clear description of the vehicle? Maybe even having a picture of the individual driving by. You know what I mean? Like, and one more thing. Think about the guy that supposedly almost got ran over as the car was exiting the neighborhood. It was brought up in the chat last night that that individual could have got a good look at who the driver was. If he was that close to almost getting hit, then he was pretty darn close to the vehicle. Could he got a good look at the driver? You get what I'm saying? And that's interesting to think about right there. There's a lot of different avenues other than just focusing on the Elantra, Banfield, all these things that people focus on. There's deeper levels of avenues we can go down that are more imperative of mens rea than just these other options, because these other options, they signify negligence, which is the other side, to diffuse that person being guilty. There's no way that person could have been guilty because of this. Kind of like I gave the example the other day. And I'm not going to go into it because I got to get through this video. I got to go get a haircut at noon. So I'm trying to get through this video. If I don't finish it, I'm going to do part 2 later on this afternoon. And then I hope y'all come back.
Low fog, low clouds, like there was no stars. There's nothing there. I'm sure it'll be argued as conjecture of, well, he likes to. Maybe he's hoping to get out of the fog and find something. He was also allegedly seen in Clarkson, Washington on video at stores hours after the murders. Some of the assumptions there is that maybe he was trying to get rid of some of the murder weaponry, or I'm wondering if it was more a victory lap in public.
I like the faded up tight. I don't like the little stubble that I call it.
With the tight white shirt on that we're seeing in the photo, just going out and about, maybe also disposing things. But I'm also wondering, is there a thrill that someone like that would get from going out looking all neat and white and clean after just committing such a horrible crime? People are freaking out, and you're out there in the crowds. I mean, Costco, Albertsons, those are fairly busy places. And if he's seen there wandering around right after the murders.
He's making a great thought there, because we've been told, I don't remember where this was, I think it might be in the documents, where he was not allowed into Costco. Think about the mental aspect of you potentially committing a quadruple murder. You're not going to know what to do at the moment. You're going to instantly get that elation of adrenaline. You're all over the place. Your mind is racing 100 miles an hour. You could tell by the vehicle exiting the neighborhood, almost potentially running over a person. Think about what you would be doing the rest of the morning, early day. What are you going to be doing? You're thinking, okay, well, I've only thought up to the murder. I never thought past the murder. So now I got to make it up as I go along. So that could be all the driving, all the, well, I'm at Costco, they won't let me in. Walking around aimlessly, looking kind of confused, looking kind of disorientated, because you're thinking, oh my God, do they know? Have they seen anything that's going to put me at the potential suspect? And then you got to keep your normal routine going. You got to go to the medical appointment. You got to go get your hair cut. You got to do all these things to continue to act normal. Think about this. There's two personalities, there's two images this individual had. They're with the chameleon, and then they're with the actor. The actor is the person that people saw in reality. This is the person who you're going to present. I'm a good guy. I'm friendly. I'm nice. Other than in the classroom, I don't know why he went that direction, but in the classroom, he presented the alter ego. I don't know if that was to defend himself from the possibility of people challenging him. So he created the alter ego to protect himself from having that challenge of any sort. I got to be the smartest man in the room. But the friendly, kind guy, getting the numbers at the pool party, all this stuff, the actor. And then all of this, the crime has taken place. And then all of a sudden, now what? What do you do after the crime? You speed away, right? But yet you don't just go home. You drive around, you stop. There's unaccounted time for 7 hours. What are you doing during that 7 hours? What is your mind going like? What are you racing your thoughts on? Are you thinking, man, how do I do this? How do I calm myself down? Because that would be so much anxiety. That would be so much intense feelings and emotions. All of a sudden he's feeling. He's feeling this. There's no more empathy, not able to feel empathy. He's feeling all this anxiety, all this stuff. That's a hell of a rush if you've ever felt that. You know what I mean? Good point. Had he ever been to Costco before? Was he a member? Good point. But do you get what I'm saying as far as after the crime? Well, leading up to the crime, you're going to be methodical. You're going to have this in your head. You planned it out. And you know what I thought about when I started thinking about this? Was when I was watching the JFK thing. Because they continued to talk about the planning. But it wasn't until after JFK got shot, if Oswald was the one, that he realized that he had been praying for it. He was running around aimlessly, trying to figure out, what the hell am I going to do? He goes into a movie theater, having the money to purchase the ticket. He is so out of his mind, he just walks in without buying the ticket. And then when he realizes that he's been caught, he starts fighting. The fight or flight is going 24/7 at that point. So think about that. After the crime is more important than the planning up leading to the crime. Many people want to speculate up to the crime, but look at all the behavior after the crime. Does that show guilt in your mind? Yeah, Israel Keyes the same. He was fine. He was the actor. He was used to it. You got to present an image to the world that I'm normal just like you. Even though you don't see me or I don't want to be seen, I present this image to you because this is the impression that I want you to see. While underneath this impression that I show you, there's the real me. There's the individual that hates people. There's not me, but in this retrospect, there's the individual that hates people, that want to get even with all the people that bullied him or hurt him emotionally in any type of way. There's the individual that had to step in and make him have an improvement plan. There's the individual that he got into a confrontation with. There's another individual that said, "Hey, we're looking at terminating your assistantship." All this stuff leading up to the eventual outburst. Think about this. And then, after the crime, he's running around like a chicken with his head cut off, so to speak.
It's the morning up, getting all dressed up in the shower. Is that something? Is that something of a thrill that they're just taking up every single moment that they can get and just soaking it all in?
Yeah, look what I can do, look what I can get away with, and nobody knows. I've got this big secret and I fooled everybody.
Do you think something like this could be brought up in trial? Obviously, it's a lot of assumptions here. They'd have to probably find something within the house, or if there is a pattern of watching these movies or something, then I could imagine these sort of things being brought in. Without it, do you think something like that could be brought in, or what would be the vehicle to bring in some of these things, if at all?
Yeah, I think it would probably be pretty hard to have something that you could present as evidence without the person coming out and owning it and being willing to discuss it.
It's going to be very fascinating, because this thing, it gets deeper and it gets darker every single day. When you see someone who's academically immersed in violent behavior, allegedly writing about how not to leave a trace at a murder scene, it's that fine line. Especially, this was done in 2020.
And he's making another great point. Think of all the individuals that go to college to be chemists. They learn so much, and then they say, screw the academic portion. I know how to make illegal substances now. I know how to make meth. I know how to make MDMA. I know how to make all these chemicals. Let me make them and sell them and make tons of money. I mean, so the fact that it's been stated that there's no way he would have thrown away his education for this, I don't believe is true, in my opinion. I believe that we all have that capability to go from good to evil and then back to good, you know? But there is an evil portion in all of us because we're fallible individuals by nature. So think about that a little bit. You know, there's been a lot said that he would not throw away his career as a PhD student, which in reality, what was he going to do? Teach at a university? What was he going to do with that PhD? Because there's only so much that you can do with that PhD. I've researched that because I am going into I'm almost through with my criminal justice degree. There's only so much that you can do with it. If you're not in law enforcement, if you're not in the investigative sector, if you're not in the lab sector, all this stuff, there's only so much that you can do with it in a very collaborated area. It's not like you can all of a sudden be, you can be a warden, you can be, you can teach at a university. So was he going to be a teacher at a university on criminology? You know what I'm saying? It's like, what was he going to do with this knowledge? And the fact that he started to lose that grip, it's kind of like learning tennis too. You master what's happening on your side of the tennis court, but just as much what's happening on your opponent's side. Exactly. Very true. You know what I'm saying? Who took your crown? I don't know. Oh, Walt took it. Okay. Um, Yeah, that is something YouTube started up. The crown thing is like to identify who the top people are that come into the chat, which is, I think it's cool. It kind of gives you the top 20 people that come into your chat periodically. But think about what I'm saying as far as people get one dimensional and they say, well, there's no way that somebody could commit a crime like this and then be going to, be a PhD student. There is a way. There is always a way. Like I always say, we all have the capability to become any of these people that we discuss every day. All of us. If there was any kind of issue going on, that the fantasy, the fantasy, the fantasy part. If you've never been active in addiction, what I'm talking about as far as the double-minded person, the actor, the perpetrator, the chameleon, then that's not going to make sense to you. But Mr. Koberger wasn't addicted to heroin. He went to rehab, but that doesn't mean they cure you of that aspect of your mindset. You're never cured till you die. And it's also right below the surface. So you have to create that alter ego in order to fool people while you're using. You have to become the actor so people aren't onto you when you're using, when you're coming down, when you're, potentially going to score. So you give this presentation of someone who you've created, not someone who you really are, if that makes sense.
Tell the difference between curious student and psychologically dangerous individual. At 2020, when he wrote this, not today, now that we have all the other context, at 2020, when he wrote this, is this the writings of a dangerous individual then?
We can't read too much into that assignment because it's probably an assignment that everyone in that class did, and everyone that got a good grade pretty much wrote the same stuff. Going over the paper, it was well done. It was, as you say, clinical.
I think he'll be a fool if he testifies, Cash. I really do. To put himself on that stand, he'll be a fool to testify.
It was factual, and that's exactly what the instructor would have expected, because you want people who work in law enforcement to understand this stuff, to understand how to preserve a crime scene. So I don't think from that one assignment we can read anything significant into it, other than he did a good job. He studied, he was a smart guy. But would this have anything to do with his later behavior? Not in and of itself, but we do know that there's a small percentage of people who are drawn to forensics and criminology and police work because they have this psychopathic streak, this need sometimes to have power over other people, or because they really want to commit violent crimes and they feel like this gives them the opportunity to become a better criminal. So when we put...
So think about it like this. If you've ever had a broken childhood or you've had issues in your childhood and you don't know why you're thinking the way you do, why you react the way you do. I've gone to school with many people who didn't understand why they were so broken. And instead of going to a therapist, they invested that money into becoming a therapist. So you have a broken person who is going to school to help others while trying to find out why they're so messed up. Think about that a little bit. Once again, he was into psychology until his master's program. He did not become a criminology major or in criminal justice till his master year. Up until then, he was a psychology major, meaning he was trying to figure out what was it about his thinking that it was a little off. What he was trying to fix himself, it sounds like. But, was he learning about himself or was he learning how to manipulate others better? And I'm not trying to be mean here, but addicts do manipulate. They lie. They misinterpret the truth. They embellish things that are not real. In their mind, they tell you one thing, but you know damn well that that's not true. But to them, it's true, and they're going to fight you to try to defend that in everything they do. Jeff said, bring to mind those guys that took classes in how to fly planes. The assumption would be that they want to be in a safe pilot, but their intentions were to fly them into buildings. Very true. Alas, and myself, harm group 25 years ago with the intent school bully. I saw her once. She did not turn up the next meeting. She was dead. People hated her as a kid, but now I think abused at home. Yeah. I mean, it's very intriguing how the mind works.
Put it all in the big picture, I can see why it's alarming to people.
And that's the interesting thing, because it seems like sometimes it can be a fine line there between you're using your skills, I'll call it that, for good or evil. I guess a skill, I would say it's something of this nature, maybe empathetically kind of empty, something where you can more scientifically look at the material, more mechanically look at the material, and keep emotion out of it, which would be helpful if you're a murderer. It would also be helpful if you're an investigator as well, to be able to really dig down and do that sort of thing. And the red flag here, I guess, or the fine line is, if it's Kohberger, when did he cross that? And was this a line that he'd already crossed back then, starting to think about
Yeah.
these fantasies of maybe not?
I mean, think about that fine line. And I thought about this very early on in the case, because one of the reasons that I got involved in this case at all was the drug aspect of it. And I thought to myself, if he had quit using, did he pick up the knowledge part? Because think about this. I work with addicts, alcoholic, criminals. I work with all of them. I've worked with them for a long time. So one thing I notice is once they get clean is they put every ounce of energy in one particular part to cross addict into another area. Many go into school, many go into jobs, many do this, they do that until they start failing or they envision that they're failing. And then they start sabotaging everything that they were working for. So, could he have put all that knowledge into psychology and all that stuff he was working toward? And then when it started falling apart, then he just said, F it. F it. I'm going to lose everything anyways. Everything I worked hard for, I'm not going to complete it. I can't I can't live with myself. Once again, all these old feelings that he had when he was a teen start coming to fruition. He can't shake them because he's not using, supposedly. And if he's cross addicted into that knowledge part, did he create the perfect killer? You know, it's okay. It's all right. I'm about to get off here anyways because I got to go get a haircut. Like I said, yesterday I heard about a guy that spoke very proudly and lightly about hunting and the bears he would kill. I think a person can choose a line with their comfort level on killing, even over humans. Yeah. I mean, it just, I've always been intrigued by this case on the mental aspect of it, not any of this other crap. That's why whenever people attack police or they go into all these realms of, you know, I've just named them, but when they go into that aspect, it becomes very counterproductive to this community. I thought this community was going to be all about trying to really figure out how the crime was committed, learning about true crime, learning about the aspects like, you know, CSI stuff, forensic stuff like that. And there are some channels that go that direction. But when I got into this, I'm going to go ahead and stop this because that's where I'm going to pick up on my next one. When I got into this, I really found out really quickly that it was not like that at all. And it really disappointed me because I felt like I was over here all alone trying to go a particular way. And it wasn't, I was in a genre where it wasn't like that at all. You know what I'm saying? Well, thank you, Cash. Thank you for that. I thank everybody who comes over and supports the channel. I'm really thankful for you guys. You know, I really thought true crime was really about investigative, educating, educating people, understanding the criminal aspect of it, and the law enforcement part of it, understanding both sides. I didn't ever think it was going to be just about speculation or your thoughts on a crime. To me, that's like listening to a romance novel, trying to interpret what love is to some people, but having your own interpretation of your bad experiences about love and relationships and all this stuff, and trying to turn the narrative from a love story to a grisly novel on, you know, other ways. Didn't Brian go out and get a haircut? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Thank you, Walt, for that. If y'all hear about a crime after I got, you know, did I commit a crime a couple days ago? No, I didn't. I like your humor. I like your humor. You keep me on my toes. That's a solid theory. Your effort theory. Yeah, pretty much. And, listening to that dog on the camera that I showed the other day in my other video that was by Dateline, that dog sounded awfully close to that camera. I want to ask you guys, could a dog, I don't own a dog, so I don't know how loud a bark could be picked up and how loud that bark was. Could Murphy have been on the patio? Could he have followed Brian out and been on that patio barking and then went back into the house? Because if that slider was open, we don't know if Kaylee's door was open. You get what I'm saying? I want y'all to think about this. I'll be back here in a little while to do the second part. I hope y'all join me because we got some good conversation going, and I'm sorry that I have to cut it quickly, but I have this appointment already preset, and I'll get charged if I don't show up. So yeah, that dog sounded like it was outside, and I thought, is that Murphy? Could Murphy have followed the perpetrator outside and been on the patio barking, maybe even did his business, and then walked back into the house? We don't know. I mean, I don't know. I just thought that damn dog barking sounded really freaking close to that camera at 11:12. Those of you with dogs, you obviously know how your dog's bark carries. You get what I'm saying? So I'd like to think a little more on that aspect. And Jeff, if you have nothing going on later, you want to jump up on panel with me, I'd like the company and we can talk about that. I think it's hard to judge from the light bulb camera because they've already cranked the audio up really high just to hear the thud. So I'm not sure about the dog. Okay. So that if they did crank up the volume, that could be an aspect of why it sounds so so loud. Yeah, I'm gonna do the second part. So y'all be sure to come back. I'm gonna do a second part. And Cash, you're always welcome here. I enjoy your thoughts and your interaction, as well as the rest of you. As well as the rest of you. And those of you that came into the chat very quickly and left, thank you for saying hello. I hope to see you on the second part. I will be back here in a little bit. I have some things I need to do. Unfortunately, Saturday and Sunday goes really fast, and those are the only days I have to run errands. I'm not going to Costco. I'm not going to the coffee shop. I'm not doing any of that, Cash, so you're good. I'm not a killer, you know. But I hope that you guys do come back here in a little bit. Y'all have an awesome midday or mid morning or midnight. So I will see y'all soon.